New Yorkers are getting ready to head to the polls, and the stakes are high for both parties. For the Republicans, our latest CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows Trump has a commanding lead in his home state with 54% compared to Ted Cruz at 21 and John Kasich at 19. And Trump is counting on that huge lead to keep his hope alive of winning the GOP nomination outright and avoid a contested convention. And for the Democrats, that same poll shows Hillary Clinton with a 10-point lead over Bernie Sanders in New York. Both are back fighting for votes in a state where they each have deep roots. Nancy Cordes is covering the Democrats, Major Garrett, the Republicans. It's great to see you both here on set. Nancy, let me start off with you. While campaigning in Manhattan, it was interesting. Hillary Clinton said she hopes to be able to wrap up the nomination on Tuesday. She mentioned she's not taking anyone for granted. But is that a shift from what we've heard from her previously?
It is, and it's possible that it was a slip of the tongue or maybe wishful thinking because she very quickly walked it back and said, now I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm going to keep going. She couldn't wrap up the nomination even if she wanted to. There are about 250 delegates up for grabs here in New York tomorrow. She needs about 600 delegates to clinch the nomination. So the best that she can do is make things even more difficult for Bernie Sanders than they are already.
Major, let's talk about the Republicans and Donald Trump specifically. How important is it for Donald Trump not just to have a win, but to win big? Does that matter?
I think there's something related in the conversation you just had, because I think Donald Trump, after a big win tomorrow night, he's going to win. He's leading by 30 points in the polls. There's no polling data that suggests he doesn't have a substantial lead in New York. There are no outliers that say, oh, no, really, the lead's only 5 points. No, they're all at 25 to 30. So it's going to be a big win for Donald Trump. And I think you're going to see for both campaigns after tomorrow night, a shift to say, this thing is really moving in our direction. Momentum is genuine now. We are the winner. We're the leader, and we're going to be the winner. They may not in the Trump campaign declare themselves the absolute presumptive nominee, but they're going to encourage people in the surrogate class and all around them in the cheering squad for Donald Trump to start talking that way. And Hillary's people may do the same thing as I say. We're going to win. This is it. We're winning, and we're winners, and we're heading to the promised land. So follow behind us. Join now before it's too late. You're going to hear, I think, a little bit more of that from the Trump campaign, because between this New York primary and the following Tuesday, another 5 primary states all lay very well for Trump. He's going to end April with huge momentum, or momentum that he hasn't seen for the last 3 weeks. And I think he's going to try to consolidate that both in political terms and in psychological terms. And Hillary may be trying to do the same thing.
That's right. And the challenge for Hillary and Trump is they will be saying that I'm going to win. It's only a matter of time. But they're going to have to keep saying that for months, because none of their opponents show any sign of being interested in dropping out until the bitter end. They all have different reasons for that. But Bernie Sanders, for instance, has already made it very clear, no matter how he does in New York, no matter how he does in this slew of northeastern states, he is staying in it until at least June 7th in California, and possibly all the way to the convention.
And because life has ebbs and flows, politics has ebbs and flows. April will end very well for Donald Trump, but May will begin probably a little tough. Indiana's the first primary, and then followed by Nebraska, Washington, Oregon. Ted Cruz is already organizing there. Those 4 contests do not set up well for Trump. He's going to have to fight and fight hard to break even there or to be competitive with Ted Cruz. So just as he's consolidating and getting all this momentum, the campaign resets itself and reminds everyone, different states, different parts of the country, different geography, different conservative Republican bases, different orientation to the 2 candidates. These things will move back and forth.
It'll be interesting to see if the staff shakeups on Donald Trump's campaign have made a difference in terms of the organizations. You and I have talked about that a lot, the importance of the ground game, Major.
It will be, and I think May is going to be an interesting example as to whether or not they begin to figure things out and they begin to smooth things out. You've begun to see Trump make fewer phone calls into the shows, do fewer interviews, pace himself a little bit more. You had what I think most people would regard as the first professional op-ed put together by the Trump presidential campaign in last Friday's Wall Street Journal. It was a coherent argument, 3 or 4 points, not idiosyncratic, not sort of a jazz improvisation, which is Trump's real, genuine contribution to American political rhetoric. And that's, to me, a sign of a campaign that's beginning to professionalize itself, organize itself, and begin to make an argument and a case about something that Trump was simply just whining about for the better part of 2 or 3 weeks. And it was begun to be reflected in his stump speeches. And so you're beginning to see some of those smoothing out of Trump tendencies, which may work to his advantage. We'll have to see.
Nancy, you mentioned Senator Sanders a moment ago. You spoke with Senator Sanders Monday and asked him about the chances of an upset in New York. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
You've pulled off upsets before.
Yes, we have.
But you were not going up against a home state senator.
That is correct. Hillary Clinton has won the U.S. Senate seat here twice. She is phenomenally well known. It is a tough race for us, but I am very pleased by the kind of energy and excitement we're seeing not only in the city, but upstate New York. We had great rallies in Buffalo, Albany, Schenectady, Rochester. So I think we got a shot to win this. Let me put the if in here, if there is a large voter turnout. So everybody, please come on out and vote.
So, Nancy, what's the reality here? How likely is an upset in this state, like the one that he saw in Michigan?
The reality is that he has pulled off several upsets. Michigan is probably the best example, but Hillary Clinton has a home field advantage here that just can't be denied. I mean, on Monday alone, she campaigned with both New York senators. She was with New York's mayor over the weekend. Governor Cuomo is a very vocal and frequent advocate of Hillary Clinton. So people here know her. They're not going to change their mind about her in 1 week. Can he get close enough to sort of make things a little too close for comfort, for him to be able to argue, look, of course I didn't beat someone who lives here, has represented the state, but I got awfully close, so just watch and see what I can do next week. Absolutely. And that's, you know, as he signaled, that's kind of the best that he's hoping for right now.
Major, back on the Republicans, you know, Donald Trump had an interview with the Washington Post, and he said that he was unsure if he would retain current RNC Chairman Reince Priebus. So at what point did you roll your eyes? Let the record show. I do think I just saw an eye roll from Major Garrett.
File that under least surprising things said by Donald Trump in last 24 hours.
But I mean, at what point is there damage done, irreparable damage done here, when you have this back and forth going on?
Look, Republicans know they're in for a shakedown cruise. They're going to have to figure out how to sort this out, and it's not going to go easy. It's not going to go well, and somebody's going to be really upset. Really upset, like I'm leaving the building upset, okay? The Republican Party is sitting atop a party that is fracturing before its very eyes, and those fractures cannot be resolved at a July contested convention because someone will have to be the nominee. If it's Trump, the Cruz people are angry, and they may either bolt or sit on their hands. If Cruz is the nominee on a second or third ballot, the Trump people, you can pretty much bet, lock, stock, and barrel walk out of that convention and don't show up in November. If it's somebody else, if it's Kasich or Paul Ryan or some other mythological unicorn Republican that nobody can imagine but keeps talking about in fanciful ways, then you have a lot of people who are momentarily starstruck, because you don't see a political unicorn very often, but once it happens, you all leave the building. In any case, the fractures are real, the divisions are real, and what Trump represents is more anti-establishment than Cruz, because if Cruz wins, the Trump people will say, okay, he was once anti-establishment, but the establishment's the one who got him in there. And so we're out, we're leaving. And that, whether it's Reince Priebus at the head of the party, is genuinely immaterial. The problems are much deeper, much more profound, and Trump can talk a good game about unity, because out of one side of his mouth, he talks unity. The other side of his mouth, he says, well, I hope there's no violence. Well, hello. Over here is violence, over here is unity, and then you have this enormous chasm in between. And it's into that chasm right now the Republican Party is heading.
What about on the Democratic side? I mean, you mentioned, so Bernie Sanders has no plans to drop out. There are no indications that he is intending to do so, that he's going to be staying in till the end, till the convention. What about the unity on the Democratic side? Because as we saw in the last debate, things got very ugly very quickly there.
Right. Well, I think a lot of it is going to be up to Bernie Sanders himself and Hillary Clinton. He's obviously staying in. Number one, he'd love to win the nomination. But short of that, the next best thing would be to influence Hillary Clinton's platform as much as possible. That's why he got into this race in the first place. And then, you know, he blew up and got millions of supporters and said, hey, maybe I can win the whole thing. But he wants to make sure that when she's standing on that stage at the convention, that she is talking about the issues that he cares about, that he has really put front and center in this campaign: income inequality, social security, economic justice, and the minimum wage. And so that's the reason that he will stay in, even if it becomes pretty clear there's no possible way he can get to the nomination, even if he was winning 90% of the votes in these later states.
Major, last question here I have. It was interesting. Donald Trump said in an interview, this interview with the Washington Post, it's very important to put some quote-unquote showbiz in a convention. Otherwise, people are going to fall asleep. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a fascinating statement to make about previous conventions, which were sleepathons. They were infomercials. They were ritualistic things drawn up 6 months in advance, and everyone just played their role on stage like minor league marionettes. That's not what we're going to happen. That's not what's going to happen in July. There'll be plenty of drama. There'll be drama starting at 6 a.m. in the morning and going all the way until midnight. As I contemplate those work hours, I begin to tremble and think I should seek another line of employment. Anyway, there's not going to be any lack of drama. There's not going to be any lack of theatrics. There's not going to be any lack of characters. I mean, this country of ours, this beloved country of ours, some 330 million people are going to meet somebody from Idaho or South Dakota or Pennsylvania or Texas or Oregon or South Carolina, who is going to be for one moment the fulcrum to 7 or 8 or 9 or 12 delegates, either at a minor league rules committee dispute or a dispute over delegate recognition, and they're going to be like a celebrity. So we're going to have characters, drama, things are going to be written on the fly.
It's kind of like The Apprentice.
Well,
yeah.
Except all of that is prepackaged and scripted, and there doesn't need to be any theatrics added to this event. And look, Donald Trump's mere presence alone will add a theatrical flair, as we've seen throughout this campaign. So Trump's right in a sort of a theoretical sense, but he's talking about the convention that needs that element the least.
Right.
And you think about it, normally the biggest drama at one of these conventions is sort of the rollout of who the vice presidential pick is going to be.
That's
in this
right,
case,
yeah.
you know, do you have Donald Trump saying, here's who my pick would be, and then Ted Cruz saying, here's who my pick would be, and John Kasich, and everybody's being trotted out at the same time?
As a means by which to get delegates to either be opposed to someone else or for you. That's a stratagem that's been used before. Ronald Reagan tried to use it in 1976, trying to get the Pennsylvania delegation by getting Richard Schweiker, saying he'll be my running mate if I get it. Ultimately, it didn't work, but that was the strategy, so we could have all sorts of things playing out.
All right, can't wait to see. We'll get you some Red Bull, some caffeine, all of that. Our intrepid campaign warriors, Major Garrett and Nancy Cordes, thank you so much.
Sure thing.